Good afternoon and welcome to this presentation on your application and your admission to UCT in 2022, specifically your undergraduate application and admission. My name is Herman and I'm joined by Marcel Maggot, who's the applications process manager, and she will be moderating your questions during the course of this presentation. I'm inviting you to vigorously submit your questions in the chat bar, and Marcel will take care of as many responses as she can, and we'll certainly deal with a couple towards the end of the presentation as well. In the few minutes we have together, we're not able to cover every aspect of application and admission to UCT. Indeed, many of the other presentations today are taking care of different aspects of that journey. But I'll try to lift out some of the key parts of it, the key moments, and try to direct you appropriately with respect to what you need to be looking out for, what about our process you need to know, and how you're able to plot your way from where we are now to early next year, when hopefully you'll be admitted as an undergraduate student. So let's get started. I want to first focus on your application, and although some of you may already have submitted an application, there are still some key parts of the application process which you need to be aware of. So the window for applying is 1 May to 31 August. It's a relatively short window. Note, importantly, that if you are still contemplating an application for admission, we do not accept late applications, so we don't have another month or two thereafter during which we accept late applications. It's a finite window, so we encourage you to submit your application and have it with us in good time. Clearly, the earlier you submit your application, the earlier you are able to attend to all the issues that relate to those applications. And so we encourage you to get it done earlier. We want to leave you with as much time to prepare some of the other submissions which you need to make. So that's your application window. When applying, you are required to make a program selection, and that is to tell us what you'd like to be admitted to. And each applicant is permitted to submit 2 program choices. The important point about our program choices, or yours as they were, is that they are considered concurrently. They're not considered sequentially. We don't consider one after the other. We consider both of them at the same time. In some cases, you are permitted to submit 2 applications or make both selections from the same faculty. And in other cases, you are required to select from different faculties. It really depends on your selection. But the important thing, as I said, that they are concurrently considered, and that means practically that sometimes you may hear, you may get a response with respect to your second choice before you do so with respect to your first choice. It all depends on the circumstances relating to those choices. Even though we close on the 31st of August for applications, we realize that many applicants, for a number of reasons, may need to change one of both of their choices. And this may be because you may not have been as well informed at the time of making that choice as you thought you were, or you came across fresh information during the course of the year and you wish to change your choice. You are welcome to do so, but only until 1 month after the closing of applications, which is 30 September. It's your prerogative to do so, and during that time, you may change to whatever you wish. Thereafter, you are no longer permitted to make those choices unless we specifically direct you to do so, or request you to do so, or permit you for whatever reason. I must just add, while I'm here, that Marcel Maggot will, in the announcement bar, which is your chat bar as well, make several key announcements during the course of this presentation, and some of them relate to some of the dates that we haven't dealt with here. Please pay special attention to those as well. When you submit an application for admission, you will be required to submit an application for accommodation as well, should you require or wish to apply for student accommodation. Note that there's a session coming up later today on student accommodation specifically, and so if that is something you wish to include in your application, I'm encouraging you to also attend that session. Your student accommodation application is really dependent on, in the first instance, on an application, or rather an offer of admission, right? So there is no way an applicant may be granted accommodation unless such an application was successful in the first instance. So please note that, and there are several criteria which affect the success of an application for student accommodation. Also, when applying, your national benchmark test registration number is required as part of your application. Now, this is important, specifically for most of our faculties, not all, and I'll come to that in a little while, because our admission criteria, of course, affect which MBTs you need to write and whether you need to write MBTs at all. And as I said, I'll deal with that in a few minutes' time. And again, I want to say that there's a session on the national benchmark test provision, particularly this year, for example. Many sessions are being provided online, and so it's in your interest to please investigate, attend that session, and see whether there's any relevant information for you. And that's your MBT registration number. And by the way, when you do your registration, as many of you would have, you need to select a particular date for your MBTs. And should you be doing it as a pencil and paper test in a physical venue, you would also need to select a venue. That's all part of preparing for the MBTs. Note that your application for admission does not include an application for funding. You are required to indicate whether you require particularly need-based funding. That's a requirement in the application, but that indication does not constitute an application. Again, there are, there are specific requirements for need-based funding, but specifically funding through the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. And our undergraduate student funding office will also be presenting today to expand on what that application entails. Great, so that's a bit about your application. Please take note of that. There's a substantially more detail that you need to be aware of. Marcel will make available links to, for example, the prospectus and the directions for applicants and resources such as those, which will go into other details, which include, for example, details of paying your application fee, etc. I'm not going to go into that level of detail. They are certainly there for you to engage with. The next slide I want to deal with refers specifically to your admission and dealing with admission for next year. And particularly, I want to focus on what elements of your application your admission depends on. What does it rest on? And so let's look at those. There are three key areas that I want to deal with. And the first one relates to your performance at school, your academic performance at school. And I've split this into performance in the National Senior Certificate taken by most South African school leavers, and performance and evidence of performance of applicants who do not take the NSC. So as far as the NSC applicants are concerned, and that would certainly be the majority of our applicants, we will need you to provide information and evidence of your performance at school, starting with your grade 11 final examination. We do that as part of your application, as well as any interim examinations that you have completed and for which you have results at the time of your application. So, for example, it's quite true that if you've already submitted your application, you won't have mid-year results and you won't have term 3 results if you're at a 4-term school. And that means that we will require you to go into student self-service. We say a lot about that in a lot of our literature. Marcel, I'm sure, will say something about that as well. Go into student self-service and update your results or your application with your results as they become available. Once that is done, you are required to submit to us copies of those results via email, so certified copies via email. In the days of us operating mostly remotely, we do not have the capacity to receive physical mail, which would typically be the case, so we require you to please submit them via email, and this would be the evidence of whatever you've captured online. Note that we require NSC applicants, and this is really important because we get loads of questions around this. We require National Senior Certificate applicants to capture their percentages against the subjects they select online in student self-service. We do not require you to upload copies of your reports, none of that. In fact, you're unable to do that. However, let's move on to international school leaving qualifications. For you, we do require copies of reports to be sent to us or results to be sent to us. You are unable to capture these in student self-service. So there's a slight difference in the way NSC applicants will update their results and in the way international qualifications may be updated. Importantly, if you've already included or rather concluded some examinations, a very common example would be the IGCSEs, for example, written by Cambridge or equivalent candidates. If you've already concluded those examinations, you are required to submit those results to us already. Some applicants may have concluded parts of their school leaving exams, for example, 2 AS levels in the past. You would be required to let us have those. And very importantly, for all international qualifications, it's important that you let us have your predicted scores to supplement any earlier results so that we can use that in consideration of your application. The second part of your admission consideration would be your performance in the MBTs. There are very specific MBT requirements stipulated in the prospectus, for example, and I encourage you to familiarize yourself with those. Note very importantly that applications to programs in the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment do not require writing of the MBTs. However, should you apply for admission to one EBE program and another program in a different faculty, you are of course required to fulfill the MBT requirements for the non-EBE application. So please be aware of that. If you live in South Africa or if you do your schooling in South Africa, you are required to write the MBTs. And if you're applying for admission to the Faculty of Health Sciences, you are required to write the MBTs wherever you may live. Right, so please note that, and therefore please prepare for the MBT component well in advance. And the third component of admission would be any additional requirements, typically stipulated by the department to which you wish to be admitted or which offers the program you're in. And examples of those are, portfolios required, for example, for the Bachelor of Architectural Science and for the Bachelor of the Bachelor of Arts in Fine Art, and those portfolios are stipulated, they are specified, and they need to be submitted. Both of those need to be accompanied by departmental forms. They're available online, and again, Marcel will provide you with a list of resources to find them. And sometimes for performing arts, you will be required to attend an audition. Right, so those are the kind of additional requirements that are program specific, which you need to be aware of and which you need to satisfy. Without submission of those documents and portfolios and attending those auditions, there's typically no possibility of admission. So that's a word about your admission. I would like to quickly go onto the question of offers and deal specifically with conditional and firm offers. Again, we get many inquiries about these, and it's important that you understand and have an understanding of what they represent. So firstly, my first comment is that there's no formula across our undergraduate programs for how offers may be awarded. They, as different as our admission criteria are, and as different as the pace is at which our applicants submit evidence of their performance at schools and when they write MBTs, etc., all of that may impact on when and indeed if conditional offers are made, right? So that's the first thing to bear in mind. So and for that reason, partly, I want to look at this in terms of the calendar, and I'm starting by marking off three important points in the calendar, and that is where we are today. The point at which we receive final results. Note, I'm not putting a date alongside these because many of these dates, as you know, are quite fluid in the circumstances we find ourselves in. And the beginning of the first semester, the teaching term of 2022. All right, so those are the first three key points I want to make. And so let's have a look at them. And I'll look at this in terms of that continuum. So depending on as I said, the evidence we have available, conditional offers may be made throughout the period, and typically, not once we have final results, which is typically in January or early in January. Hopefully that'll be the case again. But throughout the year, we make conditional offers at different points of the year. There are some exceptions. So, for example, the Faculty of Health Sciences for some programs will only start making offers from early September. And in other programs, offers may be made much, much earlier. But let's just say a word about conditional offers. So firstly, as the name suggests, they are conditional. There are some conditions contained in the correspondence sent to you which must be met in order for that offer to become a firm offer. So they're conditional. They typically depend on good performances in these results that we've been speaking about, good performances in the MBT, or good standards of submission of portfolios, performances in audition, and so on. So a lot depends on your own performance at the moment and how that relates to the requirements for admission of the programs to which you have applied. And the way those relate to each other may result in a conditional offer. Not all of our applicants receive conditional offers, of course, most don't. And in fact, applicants or some applicants who receive firm offers of admission may not have received a conditional offer at all. And that means, or that's simply because of the performance at the end of the year versus, or in relation to the performance throughout the course of their interim examinations. So there are many, many variables here, and please do not, try to look for a formula. It will be very difficult to pin down. Once final results are received, of course, then we no longer look to make conditional offers. We look to make firm offers. I spoke earlier of the fact that your two program choices may be considered or are considered concurrently. And that means that for some of our applicants, shortly after final results are available, they may in fact have two firm offers of admission. We require them to reduce those two offers to one, and that process we call the selection of preferred firm offer process. Thereafter, we will, shortly thereafter, we will commence with preparations for the actual academic year. The last point I want to make about this continuum is that, and this relates specifically to international applicants, not applicants with international qualifications, but non-South African applicants, right? And that is that around 15 November, in fact, probably on 15 November, would be the cutoff for any form of offer to an international applicant. And the reason for that is that because that's the last possible date which will leave us sufficient time to get all international applicants, give them enough time to secure and procure a study visa in order to meet the requirements for attendance in the first semester. So 15 November is the date that you need to bear in mind. That's the date by which you need to have at least a conditional offer of admission. I just want to finish off before we have a chance for some questions. Our time is quite limited. Finish off with a few quick announcements. And firstly, we typically invite many families throughout the course of each year to come and do campus tours. Unfortunately, campus tours and even self-guided campus tours are not possible at the moment for obvious reasons. And you know, if you keep an eye on our website, and if conditions change, those will certainly change. Then, if you wish to meet with one of our staff members, our admission staff members, our recruitment staff members about your specific circumstances, please write to us. Marcel will post an email address in the chat. Write to us and make that request. We will then set up an online or virtual meeting with you via one of the platforms, and at a time that suits both the staff member and your family. And you know, we'll be able to meet with you in that way. Similarly, online presentations to schools for the teachers out there. We are doing that throughout the country and in fact and beyond. So if you wish to request a presentation for your school group, please feel free to do that again at the email provided. If you wish to contact us, ensure that you're contacting the appropriate office. I can tell you that given the number of applications or applicants we have interested in admission each year, many emails and telephone requests are being misdirected. So there are some that may need to come to a central office like the admissions office or the funding office, others that may need to go to the faculty. Please ensure that you have the right one. Again, Marcel will leave you with some contact details for admissions. And then we'll move to questions. So thank you very much. We're going to deal with some of your questions, as Marcel has already been doing. And I want to pause the presentation there and just check with Marcel if there are any you'd like me to deal with, Marcel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Carl. There are a few questions. The first one, it says, what does it mean when my application is under consideration?
Right, so when your application is under consideration, it means that you've submitted an application and there is a point, in fact, most applications are in this situation. After the submission of an application, the application may not yet attract a conditional offer of admission. We will not decline an application, in May of the grade 12 year. So that means the application is under consideration. We may need additional NSC results, grade 12 results. Perhaps we may be waiting on further evidence in order to make a decision, a positive decision. Perhaps it's worth pointing out at this point that we only admit or decline an application for admission based on a set of final results, unless, of course, someone cannot possibly qualify. So if you wish to do civil engineering and you don't do physical sciences at school, you will not be able to be admitted, and we'll decline you immediately in everyone's interest, for example. Otherwise, we will consider that application as we get more and more information pertaining to it. Okay.
Thanks, Carl. The next question is, may I make both of my choices in the same faculty, for example, physiotherapy and occupational therapy?
So currently, yes, you may make two choices in several faculties, but there are limitations. So that example is possible. You won't, for example, be able to choose to apply to a general Bachelor of Arts and a general Bachelor of Social Sciences. Because essentially that's a duplicate program, and you certainly also won't be able to apply for admission to two regular commerce programs. So there are some limitations, but in general it's possible. Since in many cases it's possible, please just look out and look through the prospectus and see what is possible. And I may also add that the online application system will guide you in that respect. It won't allow you duplicate applications or application combinations that are not permitted by the faculties.
Thanks, Carl. This one is about the document uploads. So the question reads, in the application process, you are asked to upload a SA identity document. Can you use a copy of your South African passport or unabridged birth certificate if you do not yet have your ID?
Yes.
I haven't been able to get it because of the pandemic.
Yes, now I think that's absolutely understandable. There will be cases, not only relating to the identity document, but one or two other documents as well, where documents are required in our online application system, but are not yet available for whatever reason. And this is a very good example you've given us. In such cases, please submit as an interim measure a suitable substitute, such as the ones you mentioned in your question. And we'll certainly consider that in the interim and await your identity document when you have it.
Thanks, Carl. This one is related to the application fee. Shane asks, where do I upload or send my application fee once I've paid it?
Yes, so unless you've paid it via the secure online credit card payment facility which UCT offers for application fees, if you go to a bank and do it over the counter, or you do an EFT or any of those payments, you are required to submit proof of payment to us, please. And for undergraduates, you'll submit that by email to admissions-ug@uct.ac.za, simply as an attachment, or you can instruct your bank to send it on your behalf. We accept it in any form.
Thanks, Carl. I think we're almost done with the question.
Yes.
This one relates to the Cambridge A-levels.
Yes.
It reads, I'm studying Cambridge A-levels right now. Cambridge has made the predicted grades confidential because of COVID. So what do I do now? Right.
So firstly, yes, it will be our last question. We've got to finish in about a minute from now. So in the first instance, you can request your school to send the grade to us directly. So I'm not sure what you mean by confidential, if they don't want to show it to you, or whatever the case may be. But the way I suggest you do this is to ask your school to send the predicted scores to us. Many schools do so. They send it to us directly. They don't send it via their learners, AS or A-level learners. They send it straight to us, and we'll acknowledge it to you, the applicant. You'll know that we have it. We'll update your application accordingly, and so and that will not be an issue, right? So there's no need for you to have to get it from them. They may want to keep it confidential. Yeah. Okay, Marcel.
Yes, I think that's all from me, Carl. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I appreciate your presence, all of you. Please do not hesitate to contact us if you need any further support. We really do want to support you in whichever way you can. Best of luck with another tough year at school. Conditions are not what you may expect in your final year, and we wish you well, and we certainly hope, should you apply to UCT, that your application is smooth and successful, and we hope to see you next year. Thank you and goodbye.